how to quickly select bodies of functions, including function names with parameter list, also classes and other elements in a source code such as return statements with or without return keyword. This technique works with other elements in a source code such as loop statements, if statements, assignments, and so on. In this way, we can not only select those elements but also perform all kinds of operations on the selected elements such as deletion, modification, copying, and so on. Besides that, we can also quickly move around between elements in a source code. For example, if I need to jump to next functions, next or previous classes, if statements, loop statements, and many other elements. And also we can take a look how to quickly swap elements between each other. For example, if I need to swap the current function with the next one. All this will be possible with additional Neovim plugin that we are about to install. But before that, since I'm going to use Neovim from within vscode, the following extension has to be installed, and the link to the playlist where I have installed and fully configured this extension will be in the video description. So let's start installing the plugin that is going to allow us to quickly navigate in the source code as well as perform operations on different elements. And we're going to use the plugin called Neovim Treesitter Text Objects. To install this plugin, I'm going to use Lazy Package Manager that we have to install first. So let's jump onto the Lazy Package Manager site and copy installation command. Let me copy this whole chunk of code and paste it into Neovim configuration file, which by default on macOS will be located within the root folder of the current user.config Neovim folder. And then, since we're gonna use special key called leader that is frequently used in Neovim mappings, we need to define this key. So if you haven't defined this key yet, just copy this statement and paste it into Neovim configuration file. And now we have to tell Lazy Package Manager what plugin we're going to install. So I'm gonna copy this chunk of code, paste it right below the instruction for installation Lazy Package Manager. Let's remove extra stuff from here and leave it only spec table. And inside of this spec table, we're going to list all necessary Neovim plugins. In this case, I'm going to add plugin called Neovim Treesitter. This plugin is going to provide us with better syntax highlighting, but in our case, we don't need this since we use vscode and vscode has its own syntax highlighting feature. But the reason we need to install this plugin is because Neovim Treesitter Text Object plugin requires Neovim Treesitter plugin to be installed. Neovim Treesitter Text Objects plugin is exactly the one that will provide us with functionality to move around in the source code quickly and perform all kinds of operations on different objects, such as classes, functions, if statements, for loops, and so on. Next one, I'm also going to specify the function, which will be kind of an initialization function, which will be executed when vscode starts up. And right here, we're gonna require Neovim Treesitter.configs and call setup on this object. And within this object, we're going to configure Neovim Treesitter Text Objects plugin. So by using the following configuration, we're enabling the feature which will allow us to manipulate different elements in the source code by using this enable option set to true. As for this look ahead option, we're gonna come back to this option later on, but for now, the most important thing in here will be keymaps table. This will be the table where we're going to list all our mappings. As an example, I'm going to define two mappings for now. The first mapping AF will allow us to quickly select, yank, delete, change functions, including their names and parameter list. And the next one, IF, is going to be used to quickly do those same actions, but only in regards to function bodies, without their names and parameter list. More specifically, those two mappings will work in the following way. We firstly have to specify the action that we have to perform. For example, if I need to remove certain function, I will have to press D followed by AF, and this way the whole function, including its name and parameter list, will be removed. And if I, for example, need to change only the body of the function, I'm going to press CIF, since C in Neovim stands for change, which in other words will remove the body of the function and right away activate insert mode. Alright, before moving on, couple of words about this auto install option set to true. Every time we will open up new file type, for example, a TypeScript file or Python file, Neovim Treesitter Text Objects plugin needs to know how to work with particular file type, and that is why it has to download additional language parsers, and this auto install option will take care of it, so we don't have to manually specify which parsers we have to install upfront, since by using this option it is going to be done for us automatically. Every time we're gonna open up new file type, the parser for that language will be automatically installed. Every time we modify this configuration file in order for changes to take effect, we have to reload vscode. And right after that, let's try it out. I'm gonna put my cursor on top of some function, and let's say I need to select this function, and for that I'm going to press sequence of keys V, A, F, and the whole function including its name is highlighted. But if I need to select only the body of this function, I'm gonna press V, I, F. So VAF, where A stands for around, is going to select the whole function, including its name and parameter list, and VIF, where I stands for inside, is going to select only the body of this function without its name. And this works with all other operations. For example, if we need to remove the whole function, we press DAF, or if we need to remove only the body of the function, we'll press DIF. The same works with yanking and changing. Let's say I need to change the whole body of the function. To do that, I will press CIF. The content will be removed, and we will activate insert mode. And that's about it for the first lesson, where we have installed and configured Neovim Treesitter Text Objects plugin. In the next lesson, we're going to start defining different keyboard shortcuts that will help us simplify our development workflow. The link to the repository with this configuration file will be in the video description. In this lesson, we're gonna review several key combinations that will allow us to quickly work with particular elements in a source code: classes, loops, if statements, parameters, and so on. Right away, I'm gonna paste several mappings in here, and we're gonna go through them one by one. And let's start with the first pair, intended to be used with classes. And to demonstrate these mappings, I'm going to generate dummy class at the bottom of this file. And for example, let's say I need to remove this whole class, including its name. And for that, I'm going to press D, which stands for delete, followed by AC, which means around class. And the whole class, including its name, will be removed. Next one, in order to change internals of this class, I'm going to press CIC. We're gonna remove everything inside this class, and the insert mode will be activated. If I need to only select the internals of this class without doing anything else, I can press VIC, and the highlighting will appear on the internals of this class. Then if I need to select this class including its name, I'm gonna press VAC. In this case, this combination stands for Visual Around Class. Alright, moving on to the next set of shortcuts, intended to be used with if statements. I'm going to quickly create an if statement in here to demonstrate these shortcuts. And for example, if we need to select internals of this if statement, I'm going to press VII, which stands for Visual Inside If Statement. As you can see, highlighting appears at the body of this if statement, but if I need to select the whole if statement, including its condition, I'm gonna press VAI. I'm primarily demonstrating these shortcuts on the example of the selection, but it works with all other operations as well, such as deleting, changing, yanking. Let's move on to another set of shortcuts intended to be used with for loops. I'm going to create for a loop at the bottom of this file, and let's press the first shortcut, In this case, I would like to change the internals of this for loop, and I'm going to press CIL, which stands for change inner loop. To be able to remove this whole loop statement, I can press DAL, which stands for delete around loop. Moving on to another set of shortcuts which will help us to work with function and method calls. So for example, if I'm gonna position my cursor on top of this method call and press VIM, which stands for Visual Inside Method, I'm gonna select internals of this call, which means only the parameter. And if I'll need to select the whole method call, I'm gonna press VAM instead. Let's try it one more time. If I'm gonna change the argument of this expression which is getting returned from this function, I'm gonna press CIM. And if I'd like to do something with the whole return statement, I will press VAM first to put selection on top of this return expression, and then I can do any other operation. With the help of the next pair of keyboard shortcuts, we're gonna be able to work with blocks. And just because bodies of functions are also considered blocks, we can easily do all kinds of things with internals of functions. So if I'll press VIB, it will select the internal of this block, in other words, the whole body of this function. Let's try one more time on the next function. After pressing VIB, I'm gonna get the whole body of this function selected. But of course, blocks are not only function of bodies. If I'm going to add curly braces to this if statement and then press VIB, then the block of this if statement will be selected. Or if I'll need to select the whole if statement, including its condition, I'm gonna press VAB. Everything works as expected. Moving on to the next pair. And for this one, I'm gonna create the function with several arguments at the bottom. And let's see how those keyboard shortcuts will allow us to quickly work with function arguments. Let's say I'm gonna need to quickly change certain argument. Let's press CAA, which stands for change around argument. So in this case, the third parameter has been removed, including its surrounding commas. Or if I need to just visually select certain parameter, for that I'm gonna press VAA. If I have to only select parameter name along with its type without commas, I'm gonna press VIA. Sometimes it's also useful to work with comments. To demonstrate the following shortcuts, I'm going to create several comments at the bottom of this file. And now let's try the first shortcut of that pair. As you can see, after pressing VA/, I'm gonna get the whole comment selected. For some reason, another shortcut doesn't work for me, which is supposed to select internals of this comment. So in my case, I'm always getting the whole comment selected after pressing VA/. Moving on to the next shortcut, and by using this shortcut, we can easily work with any statements in a source code, with for loops, if statements, function declarations, and so on. If I need to quickly remove this if statement, I'm gonna press DAS. Next one, let's say I need to select the current if statement, I'm gonna press VAS. Or if I need to select the whole function declaration, I'm going to press VAS while having my cursor on top of this function signature. It also works with return statements. If I press VAS, I'm gonna get this return statement selected. Alright, as for the next set of shortcuts, they let us quickly work with assignments. Let's find an example of an assignment. I'm gonna put my cursor on top this line with assignment and try to press VGA equal sign, and this whole assignment will be selected. If I need to select only the left part of this assignment, I'm gonna press VGL equal sign. Or if I need to select the right part of this assignment, for that I'll have to press VGR equal sign. In the same way, we can also work with return expressions. So the next pair allows us to work with expressions returned from functions, including or excluding return keyword. I'm gonna press VIR, which stands for visual inside return, and I will get this whole expression selected. If I need to also include return keyword, I'm gonna press VAR, which stands for visual around return. And finally, we have reached the last pair, and this one allows us to work with regular expressions in a source code. I'm going to generate regular expression and demonstrate those shortcuts. So for example, if I need to select the internal part of this regular expression, I'm gonna press VIZ. And if I need to also include slashes in the selection, I'm gonna press VAZ. We have reviewed several keyboard shortcuts that allow us to work with certain elements in a source code. By using these shortcuts, we can easily delete, yank, change, and select individual elements in a source code. The link to the repository with this configuration file will be in the video description. Now that we know how to perform operations on certain elements in a source code, such as editing, deletion, selection, and yanking, in this lesson let's take a look at the keyboard shortcuts that will allow us to jump between several elements in the source code. And to do so, I'm going to add this move table in the configuration, and by using this enabled option set to true, we are enabling all those movements. So let's start with the first table with keyboard shortcuts. Go to next, start. The following mapping is going to allow us to jump to the beginning of the next elements. For example, to the beginning of next functions, classes, blocks, loops, parameters, and so on. As you can see, each such mapping includes closing square bracket, and so that in order to jump to the next function, I'm going to press closing square bracket F. And in the same way, we're gonna be able to jump to the beginning of each type of element. To jump to the beginning of the next class, I'm gonna press closing square bracket C. To jump to the beginning of the next for loop, I'm gonna press closing square bracket L, and so on. Let's try some of those keys in action. So in order to jump to the beginning of the next function, I'm going to use closing square bracket F. As you can see, we are jumping to the beginning of next functions. Now I'm gonna add a couple more classes in this file to demonstrate the next shortcut, which will be allowing us to jump to the next class definition, specifically to the beginning of each next class. To do so, I'm gonna use closing square bracket C. Or if we'd like to move in the opposite direction, we can use opening square bracket C. All those forward movements also have opposite direction movements, but in these mappings, instead of using closing square bracket, we're gonna use opening square bracket, and all other keys are the same. So in order to jump to the beginning of the previous class, I'm going to use opening square bracket C. Alright, one more time, I'm going to press closing square brackets F to jump to the beginning of the next function definition, or to move in the opposite direction, I'm going to press opening square bracket F, and this way I'll be moving to the beginning of the previous functions. And to jump to the beginning of the previous class, I'm gonna use opening square bracket C. Next one, to quickly jump between if statements, I will use opening or closing square brackets I. Then to jump between for loops, let me add a couple of for statements at the bottom of this file. And now to quickly jump between those for loops, I'm going to use closing or opening square brackets L. As you can see, we are moving around for loop statements. Then to jump between function or method calls, we can use opening or closing square brackets M. To jump around several blocks, in other words, those elements that start with opening curly brace and end with closing curly brace, we can use opening square bracket or closing square bracket B. And finally, in order to jump around function parameters, we can use opening or closing square bracket A, and we are moving between these function parameters. Moving on to the movement between comments, and for that I'm going to use opening and closing square brackets /. And in order to navigate between statements, I'm gonna press opening square bracket or closing square bracket S. Then we also have an option to move between assignment statements. Let's use opening or closing square bracket equals sign to move between assignment statements, and to navigate between return statements, I'm going to use opening or closing square bracket R. Let's go back to the configuration file. In here we can also see some mappings that let us move not to the beginning of the previous or next element, but also to the end of the next or previous elements. And the only difference in here would be that we are using capital letters. So in order to go to the end of the next function, we'll have to press closing square bracket capital F. To go to the end of the next class, we'll press closing square bracket capital C, and so on. Or in order to move in the opposite direction to the end of the previous elements, we're going to use opening square brackets and different capital letters that are used in these mappings. So let me demonstrate movements between functions in this way. I'm going to jump to the end of the previous function or next function. To do so, I'm gonna use opening or closing square bracket capital F. Let's try it out with class definitions. So to jump to the end of the next class, I'm gonna press closing square bracket capital C. And to move to the end of the previous class, I'm gonna use opening square bracket capital C. And this is how we can quickly navigate between several elements in a source code with the help of Treesitter Text Objects plugin. Besides moving around, we can also swap several elements with each other. And to do so, I'm going to add the next configuration block under the swap key. Here we are also using enable key to enable this behavior. And down here I'm going to define several mappings that will allow us to swap several elements with each other. But there is a special key called leader used in these mappings, and for that we need to define this leader key first. I have already done so, and right here is where I have defined this leader key. And so that what it will allow me to do is when pressing space and A, I'm gonna be able to swap current function parameter with the next one. Then when pressing space and F, I'm going to swap the current function with the next one. And when pressing space and B, I'm going to swap current block with the next one. And down here there is another set of shortcuts. Those are similar ones to the previous ones, but they will perform a swap in an opposite direction. So for example, I need to swap the current function parameter with the previous one, and I will have to press space PA in this case. And then to be able to swap the current function with the previous one, I'm gonna have to use space PF, which stands for previous function. And finally, to be able to swap current block with the previous one, I'm gonna press space PB, which stands for previous block. So let's see how these mappings work in practice. I'm going to position my cursor on top of the first function parameter right here. And if I'll press space and A, which stands for next argument, I'm gonna swap the current argument with the next one. And to be able to swap the current function parameter with the previous one, instead of space and A, I'm gonna press space PA, which stands for previous argument. So as you can see, these swaps might come in handy sometimes. Now I'm going to add a couple more blocks at the bottom of this file. Let's create an if statement as well as for loop. So we'll treat those as blocks, and now in order for me to swap the current block, which is this if statement, with the next one, I'm going to press space and B, which stands for next block. And this way, this if statement is going to be replaced with a for loop. And sure enough, if I'm gonna press space PB, which stands for previous block, I'm gonna replace the current block with the previous one. And finally, let's take a look at another similar mapping which will allow us to swap functions around. So to be able to swap the current function with the next one, I'm gonna press space and F, which stands for next function. And to swap current function with the previous one, I will press space PF, which stands for previous function. And just like that, besides performing certain operations on elements in the source code and moving around, Neovim Treesitter Text Objects plugin also allows us to swap certain elements with each other. In order to simplify those motions that we have discussed in one of the previous lessons, such as closing square bracket F to move to the beginning of the next function, or closing square brackets S to move to the beginning of the next statement, and vice versa, to move to the beginning of the previous function we can press opening square bracket F. So to simplify such movements we can define a couple more mappings in our configuration file. Let's do so right now. I'm going to paste the following chunk of code to the bottom of my configuration file. And what it basically does is it defines a couple of mappings specifically for 3 modes in Vim, such as normal, visual, and operator pending mode. And what those mappings will allow us to do is basically to repeat motions forward and backward. So instead of always pressing closing square bracket F to move to the beginning of the next function, we could just use single quote in my case. And to move in an opposite direction, we can use comma. So now we only have to press certain keyboard shortcut to activate motion in a particular direction. And then to repeat previous motion, we can just use single quote or comma. As a reminder, we also have to restart vscode after each modification of this init.lua configuration file. And now let's see how it works. So first of all, I'm going to press particular keyboard shortcut to activate motion, for example, closing square bracket F to move to the beginning of the next function. And after this, in order to go to the next function, I only have to press single quote instead of constantly pressing closing square bracket F. And this approach is going to work with all those motions that we have previously discussed. We just have to press particular keyboard shortcut which corresponds to a certain motion only once, and then to repeat this motion to move forward or backward, we can use single quote or comma to repeatedly trigger this motion. Alright, now let's go back to the configuration file and focus on the look ahead option that we have previously set to true. And what this option does is it allows us to leave the cursor in any place in the code instead of always putting it on the particular object. For example, if I need to select the next function, I don't have to firstly move my cursor on top of this function. So instead, I can just press VAF right away, even though if currently my cursor is located before that function. But this is still going to work, and the next function will receive selection. Let's say we have to select the body of the next function. To do so, I don't have to position my cursor on top of the body of this function. I can just press VIF while having my cursor before that function, and right away the body of the next function will be selected. So now let's summarize what we have done in this series. Let's start from the beginning. First of all, we have installed Lazy Package Manager by using the following chunk of code. And down here we have used this package manager to install additional plugins, particularly Neovim Treesitter Text Objects, which provide us with additional motions and text objects. Then within this config function we have added several mappings, which allow us to move around the source code and apply modifications to different elements in a source code. And finally we have added a couple more lines with a few mappings, and those mappings are intended to simplify motions backward and forward. Instead of using the same keyboard shortcut to move forward or backward, we could just use keyboard shortcut only once, and then to repeat that same shortcut we could just use single quote to move forward or comma to move backward. And that's about it for this series. Link to the repository with the final init.lua configuration file will be in the video description.